So today we're going to kind of take off from the one of the things we've been talking about. Kind of last few weeks have been dancing around it as we looked at Christianity, or specifically Jesus in the Talmud. Um, and interestingly, it kind of dovetails really nicely with our Tuesday morning class, which is the book of Daniel. That when we talk about Jewish messianism, the book of Daniel is a link between um, Judaism and Christianity. And I said it yesterday, there is no Christianity without the book of Daniel, without that mentality, without the speculation about which we haven't gotten to yet. So if you want to come Tuesdays, if you're watching and you're so far we've been reading about the court tales. We read about Daniel in the lion's den. That's what we finished with. We read about Daniel's friends in the oven, in the burning furnace. We read we read about Daniel, Daniel's trials for while he was in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, and then later in the Persian court. But we're going to get into his visions, and that's really where we get into the speculation, and where we really get into, um, to some extent, the end of days, if you will. But they didn't really look at it necessarily in the Jewish world as the end of days, but a beginning of something new. And when Daniel was written, it was written during the Greco-Roman period, specifically the end of the Greco part, which was the Seleucid dynasty, King Antiochus, King Antiochus, who we talk about at Hanukkah. And then not much later after that story is when the Romans kind of popped in, and they pop in about 70 years after that. And so for a little bit of time, when we talked about a couple weeks ago, for about 70 years, the Maccabees are in charge, and they don't do a great job running the country. I mean, they do to some extent, but they're not very popular eventually with the people. The people are like, they're really no better than anybody. They're not better than the Greeks. And as they're about to see, they're not that much better than the Romans. The Maccabees become pretty corrupt, and they fight amongst themselves, and they let the country get dragged into a whole bunch of garbage. And so the Maccabees, and we'll look at it in our Wednesday classes when we get to that part of Jewish history. We'll have a nice little study of this. The Maccabees were eventually problematic. And so um, the book of Daniel talks about that, and also kind of talks about or speculates that eventually there will be a new reign of a king in the land of Israel, and specifically this king will be a Davidic king. This will be a king uh, through the original Davidic dynasty through David. Um, Remember, the Maccabees were not kings through David. They were priests. They were Kohanim. They were descendants of Aaron, and they should never have been kings. They were not supposed to have that kind of power. They took that power. Um, the rabbis and other Jews that lived in that time, who didn't like the fact that they had that kind of power, still hoped that there would be a son of David, a descendant of David, who would become the ruler, and eventually, again as the Messiah, someone who would bring peace and a new dynasty. The idea that that person would never die, that's a little different. And that's where we start to kind of get into what Christianity did with this. But in the Talmud, and in the end of the end of Daniel, so even in the Bible, we see this speculation and hope for a renewed dynasty. But definitely, again, in the end of the Bible, the last book of the Bible, which is Daniel, the last book chronologically, or when it was written, and then through that period, and through the period of the Talmud, and when the Christian Bible was written, there was this hope. The fact that Christians froze and fixed on Jesus is obviously how Christianity came into existence. But you'll see some similarities here as we look at this speculation, and specifically how this plays out. So that's what we're kind of looking at here, and specifically we how we get by. And so I think there's obviously some important lessons here for us today. Um, and so let's take a look. So, and this text comes right after the parts that we were reading about, which was about how much time is going to elapse. Um, and so we started talking about this before. So let me just see if there's. Um, we talked about waiting for the Messiah and the fact that in Judaism we say that we wait for him, right? And that's kind of what we read 2 weeks ago. And we said that one of the reasons why we do that is because if people say that he's going to come at a certain date and he doesn't come, then everyone's going to say he's never going to come. So it's better for us not to do it. And we say, happy are those who wait for him. We say, Anima Amin. And I will show you this, and then we're going to go ahead again. And so they started talking about, the rabbi started talking about waiting for him. And as I said, I just want to, I actually want to show you what we read 2 weeks ago. So they talked about how long this is going to be, and they talked about the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees ruled for 70 years, and King Herod and his descendants for 50 years, and then Bar Kokhba. So they're talking about the time. And again, this is kind of where we left off. May those who calculate the end of days be cursed, as they would say once the end of days that they calculated arrived and he didn't come, that he will no longer come. So don't do that. So wait. And so here is one of the things it says. And it says again, happy are those who wait for the Messiah, for the time. So Abiah said, the world has no fewer than 36 righteous people in each generation who greet the divine presence, as it is stated. Happy are they who wait for him. Lo, which means for him. In Hebrew, that's Lamed Vav. Lamed Vav. Lamed Vav is for him. But it also has a numerical equivalent, right? Lamed Vav is 36. Lamed is 30, a Vav is 6. So just like we have Chai, which is half of that, not a coincidence, half of 36 is 18. That's a Chet and a Yud. So this, what we call gematria, these number significance in Hebrew are very important. They pop up in the Talmud, and of course, they're very important in Kabbalah and mysticism, which we'll talk about on Wednesday nights, because that's one of the classes, or a couple of classes we're going to do are on Jewish mysticism, on Kabbalah. Lamed Vav, 30, the number 36 is a mystical number because it's double Chai, and it also is Lo, for him, which is 36. So 36, happy are those who wait for him, Lo. The numerical value of Lo, spelled Lamed Vav, right, is 36. The Gemara asks, is that so? But doesn't Rava say the row of the righteous before the Holy One, blessed be he, extends 18,000 parsings? As it is stated with regard to the city of God at the end of the days, it shall be 18,000 reeds about. And the name of the city from that day shall be, and this is a line from Ezekiel, the Lord is there. Right? So doesn't it say there's 18,000 parsangs of righteous people? That's a lot. That's miles and miles of righteous people. The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. Lo kasha, this is not a difficult. This statement of Abiah refers to the 36 people who view the divine presence through a luminous crystal, which in Aramaic is a bia sparklaria. You hear the word sparkle in there, right? Bisparklaria. It's got a Greek and Aramaic cognate. And that statement of Rava refers to the multitudes who view the divine presence through a crystal that is not luminous. And so what it tells us is that there's 36 people who actually view God through, they see God like through a luminous crystal. Everybody else can see God, but not quite the same way. And what they're talking about here, and again, I just want you to know that they start talking about, other numbers, and says, are there really that few, right? and so maybe there's hardly any, right? But here's the interesting thing. Um, there are those who may enter to view the divine presence only by requesting and being granted permission from the angels. That statement of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is referring to the select few who may enter to view the divine presence even without requesting permission, for whom the gates of heaven are open at all times. And these, I think that's the last text. Yeah, that's the last text. What this is saying is that there's 36 people. There's 36 people in the world who are able to essentially be making the world ready for redemption because they have a connection to God that is so deep that they can't they don't even they don't even need to access God. A good person would be able to access God by praying or by intermediaries, by angels, by maybe even not until they pass. But no, there are certain people, 36 of them, who, according to tradition, keep the world literally alive. And what happens is that I'm just going to show you this concept, in case you haven't heard of it, is that um, in the passage we just read, right? Right, we just read this one. There are no fewer than 36 righteous people who greet the Shekhinah in each generation, right? Um, so there's a line that we're going to get to in a couple of weeks from Daniel, at the very end of Daniel, which also talks about people who lead the masses and who will be like stars forever and ever. But this concept that we have, that there are 36 people, and again, we call them the Lamed Vav Tzadikim, or sometimes we call them in kind of Yiddish, Lamed Vavniks, is this idea that there are these 36 people who keep everything going. Again, you saw it in the Talmud. That's the first place that we see it, that it refers to these 36. Now, we also sometimes call them a tzaddik nistar, which is a hidden righteous person. Because what's interesting about this tradition is that it develops, and it develops into this concept. In later generations, it says that, and especially in Hasidic Judaism, it becomes something that's talked about, is these people are hidden. At least they're hidden for now. And this idea that the 36 righteous people are hidden, they don't even know each other. And so what's interesting about this is that these concealed people are concealed or hidden even from each other. And then there's even traditions that they don't know that they're Lamed Vavniks. They can't know. So sometimes the traditions are kind of followed or kind of like believed, if you will, or kind of held, that they don't even know it themselves. Then there's other traditions are they know it, but they can't tell anybody, even their own families. And sometimes they have powers. Sometimes they have mystic powers, and they can help other people. Now, obviously, a lot of this sounds a little bit like superheroes. Some people say that these concepts affected, and this will be one of our classes, by the way, because it's already on the list, Jewish superheroes. the role that Jews played actually in superheroes, because there aren't that many Jewish superheroes, but there are a whole lot of Jewish elements to the superheroes because almost every superhero that you can name was created by Jews. Whether it was Stan Lee or Siegel, who created Superman, or Kane, who created Batman, the leaders of, and Stan Lee created everybody, virtually every superhero you can think of was created out of a Jewish mind. And there's a real question whether, and again, there have been even some comics that have been based on Lamed Vavnik's, not big comics, but it was kind of referred to in some of the old comic strips. And we'll look at it, I promise. But I'm bringing it up now. That these are people who can possess powers. They don't tell anybody, which is obviously something you saw from the beginning with Clark Kent and Superman. And Siegel and Schuster were cousins, were Jewish guys who were definitely influenced by Jewish identity. Whether it was directly Lamed Vavnik stuff is open to speculation, but did they know stories like that? Did they hear stories like that? They would have. But the idea that Jews had to kind of conceal their mystical powers, or that they had to just conceal their identity, goes all the way back to Esther, and he goes back to the Bible. So it's possible. But what's amazing about it is that with these mystical powers and with this responsibility comes no power in reality. It's not even that they don't have power. In some cases, they suffer. In some of the versions of these stories, they suffer. So, as you can see, humility is one of the most important things that these people have. So they can't be known. They can't be told by people that they're a Lamed Vavnik, because they'd have to deny it. They're too humble to know. And again, in some of these versions, one of them could be the Messiah himself or herself. In addition, you can see right here, the number 36 is twice 18, right? Okay. In some versions of these stories, the people suffer. The people actually go through suffering. And you can see some of the versions of these stories that have existed in popular works. Look at all these. Yeah.
They don't even know.
Yes.
And that to me makes more sense than anything. Because if they would know, if they knew, they might say, hey, I'm one of these guys. But if they didn't know, they'd still be working hard at it.
Yeah.
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 That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rabbi, what Mike say?
He said, Mike, say it a little loud.
Said that it makes more sense to me that these 36 wouldn't know that they were Vodniks, because if they knew, they might, just settle down and say, hey, I'm getting my 3,000 strikeout tonight, but if you didn't know, you're going to really work hard at it.
Yeah. And again, this idea that they can never claim that they are. She said, I'm listening. Yeah. So this is a really interesting idea, because again, it kind of allows for us to aspire. I mean, even though we're not supposed to, but if we are one of these Lamed Vavniks, that we understand that our purpose here is really important. It's keeping the world alive, because again, the idea here is that if any of these people are missing, the world would come to an end. Right? So they're integral for everything to continue to happen, which means that if one of them dies, another one takes their place. So again, how does one of these people get born? Well, they're born, and it's not like they're born to the family of Lamed Vavniks. They're born, and they're like the Dalai Lama, who, by the way, I heard today said he's going to have a successor, which was a big deal. But he knows the Dalai Lama. But it is almost like that, except for the fact that the people don't know. And that's crucial. Because nobody comes out and says, I'm a Lamed Vavnik. You can't. You can't. It would literally mean that he's not one of them or she's not one of them. So it was always interesting that they don't know, or we don't know. Maybe they know. Because the Talmud kind of hints that they do know because they see God in this kind of like through this lens or through this sphere that most people can't. But and again, if they have powers, they know they have the powers because they know other people don't have those powers. But this idea is I think it's a really interesting one, and it definitely has this kind of like even I would say and again here's you could see like even Jody Pickle has it in the book Keeping the Faith, that there's that people have referred to it. It's not like it's again this has been on in many things that in many popular popular sources have referred to it. I mean, one of the Coen Brothers movies has it. I mean, it's a very Jewish movie. It's a serious man. But this idea that these people keep the world going is amazing and is one that, if it's taken to the extreme, which is that these people even have to suffer, it's almost like they're a little bit like a collective Messiah, if you will, or not necessarily a Messiah, but the people who are keeping this world going, and without them, it's all over, which is not the same as the Messiah, but there's definitely a messianic element to that, which is that these people are necessary for us to be here. And we are very, we hope that they're here because if they don't, then everything falls apart. So that's kind of the concept that we have, which is again almost like I would say almost like a collective one. But again, it's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of them there, and so we don't really know who those people are. And again, this idea is one that we're going to pick up right now, which is that so when is this good time going to come? And so the rabbis then get into this discussion, and again, some of it they go back to Daniel, which is what we're reading on Tuesday mornings, and then the rabbis get into this discussion about like, well, how do we know when the Messiah is coming? And because they won't give up on it, and they said, look, we can't speculate on when it's going to be or when that special day is, but like, do we get hints? Is there a way to start saying, okay, well, we don't know when it's going to be, but when we start seeing these things, we're gonna know. And again, this is interesting because this is really kind of the backbone, also the Book of Revelation for Christians. These ideas of like, what are the signs? We go, well, that's pretty apocalyptic. That's that's where we think that's Christian, but it really came out of Judaism. It really came out of the Bible. It came out of what we're going to see again in the book of Daniel, but also to some extent, we see it in other parts of the Bible because when like a prophet Ezekiel talks about things or Jeremiah talks about things, even though they might have happened in the second temple, people still say, yeah, but when that temple was destroyed, those prophecies exist then for the third temple, for the next time that we rebuild. And so this is what it says in the text, in the Talmud. Rabbi Abiah says, you have no more explicit manifestation of the end of days than this following phenomenon. And the word that they use is actually the end, right? This is the end. the end of our times, if you will. And they said, "But you, mountains of Israel, you shall give your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel, for they will soon be coming." Again, the line is from Ezekiel. And there's lines like that we saw in Ezekiel and Jeremiah, which is the Jews are going to come back, which is when produce will grow in abundance in Eretz Yisrael, it is an indication that Messiah will be coming soon. Well, guess what? That is happening now. As Israel becomes a country with abundant produce, people have said this is proof. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of Orthodox Jews thought it was wonderful when Israel started regrowing and putting a lot of effort into the agricultural makeup of the land, which is one of Israel's pioneering features, right, of the kibbutzim and what Israel did for really the first 30 or 40 years of its existence before it shifted to more of a tech country. They were growing things. They were growing oranges, and they were growing every kind of fruit and lots of different things that they would come out of Israel. Every product that came out was to some people a sign that we're living in the Messianic times. Because again, the land is going to come back to life. Rabbi Eliezer says, "You have no greater manifestation for the end of days." Remember, because that was Rabbi Abba said that. Rabbi Eliezer says, "You have no greater manifestation of the end of days than this following phenomena, as well as it is stated, for before these days there was no hire for man, nor any hire for beast, nor was there peace from the oppressor to him who exits or to him who enters." And that's a line from Zechariah, which is, there are no wages for work and no rent paid for one's animal. That is an indication that the coming of the Messiah is at hand, which is interesting because that's almost the exact opposite. It doesn't have to be the exact opposite, but it doesn't seem like things are going really well. Zechariah is also talking about the end of days. And remember, Zechariah was the one who talked about the Messiah coming in on a white donkey, which is why Jesus comes in on a white donkey. He's fulfilling Zechariah's prophecies. So people looked at Zechariah as one of these prophets who talked about the fact that there would be times that would, be what we would call a messianic era. And again, you can take the stuff out of context, but that is what, that is kind of the words that we actually say for the end of I'll just share with you. I'll just share with you this one thing here. So, second. I'm going to show it to you in Hebrew, but the end of Zechariah is the last paragraph of Aleinu, which is Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad, right? Which is Zechariah 14:9, which is on that day, Adonai will be one and God's name will be one. So, this is something that we use at the end of Aleinu, this view that there will be a time when God will be one. But Zechariah also talks about economic uncertainty that's going to happen. And so they opened up that issue of there was the quote from Zechariah, and then the rabbis say, what's that phrase? Nor was there peace from the oppressor to him who exits and to him who enters. Rav says it means that even for Torah scholars, With regard to whom the promise of peace is written, as it is written, great peace have they who love your Torah, and there's no obstacle for him. That's from Psalms. There will be no peace from the oppressor. And Shmuel says it means the Messiah will not come until all the prices are equal. Well, those are two very different things. Peace of shalom is on one hand even 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 Torah scholars won't have peace, and they should always have peace. They won't have peace during the Messianic times, right before the Messiah comes, during those pre-times. And then this other understanding is that prices are going to be all messed up. And that's what the word shalom means. It means that the shalom will be through the fact that like all prices are out of whack. There's no like real prices anymore. Totally different understandings of that. I mean, we'll read the rest of this, but we're going to get to the next. This is kind of where the next paragraph. But Rabbi Hanina says the son of David will not come until a fish will be sought for an ill person and will not be found, as it is stated with regard to the downfall of Egypt. Then I will make the waters clear and cause their rivers to run like oil. That's from Ezekiel, one of our other prophets, again, who talks about the next phase of existence. And again, he was probably talking about, as we talked about, when the Jews came back from Babylonian exile. But we hold out that it's for whatever exile we're coming back from, meaning that the current. So when they came back from the second temple's destruction, which we're still doing to some extent now, but so no fish. That means that the current in the rivers will come to a virtual standstill, and is written thereafter, on that day I will cause the glory of the house of Israel to flourish. So these lines from Ezekiel seem to be saying, you know, that there's going to be some really really bad. There's going to be some really bad climate change stuff, and so diseases, wars, those kind of things will happen. And again, some people say that some of the stuff will come because of stuff that'll happen in the water. And again, specifically in the book of Revelation, there's seven signs, and so you know, part of those visions are things that come from the sea, come from the water. But again, whether this is the same kind of idea or not, but there's versions of this. We're almost there, but there's a little something in each one of these paragraphs to see. Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina says, the son of David will not, and here again, you can see the text has changed from the text has changed from the end of days to the son of David will not come until these things happen. So here's Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina says, the son of David will not come until the contemptuous kingdom of Rome, that's what they're talking about, will cease from the Jewish people, as it is stated, and he shall sever the sprigs, the chazal zalim, with pruning hooks, from our prophet Isaiah. And it is written thereafter, at that time shall a present be brought to the Lord of hosts by a people scattered and hairless, which are lines from Isaiah. So they're saying that the word Hazalah is similar to Hazal Zalim, which are the sprigs that are being cut with the pruning hooks. So this is Rome. Rome has to cease. Rome has to come to an end. Well, they did 1,500 years ago. But there are other people who say it didn't, because every successor empire from the Romans that was, again, Roman, and then they became Christian. And as long as there was a Christian empire, it was still Rome. So if it was the French or the British or the Italians or whoever, the Germans, whoever it was still Rome. So there are some who believe that until there's no longer a Christian dynasty in charge, that's another thing that will happen when the son of David will come. Again, you can make the argument every single year that we've lived since there hasn't been a Christian kingdom in charge, which is, I mean, I guess you can make the argument that England was a Christian kingdom who had dominion over Israel until 1948. You could say that. And there are people who say that. I'm saying that because there are people who say that. Okay. Now look at this one. Zairi, Rabbi Zairi said, or known as Zairi, said that Rabbi Hanina said, the son of David will not come until the arrogant will cease to exist from among the Jewish people, as it is stated, for then I will remove from your midst your proudly exalting ones, which is from the prophet Zephaniah. And it is written afterward, and I will leave in your midst a poor and lowly people, and they shall take refuge in the name of the Lord. Which seems to be that the problem isn't from the outside, it's from inside. It's your own people. And until those people are gone, the arrogant people, he's not coming. So we need to get the arrogant people out of here. And that's an interesting one. That's really interesting. So he can't come until those people are gone. So again, the text has become the son of David will not come, right? It's not necessarily, again, the end of days. It's not put into those words, but at least the beginning of the new world won't come until then. Rabbi Simlai said in the name of Rabbi Eleazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, that's the guy we read about who his father was Rabbi Shimon, and the two of them went into the cave. So this is that guy. The son of David will not come until all the judges and officers will cease to exist from among the Jewish people, and there will be no more autonomous government in Eretz Israel, as it is stated, and I will turn my hand against you and purge away your dross as with lye and take away your base alloy, and I will restore your judges as the first, which is a line from Isaiah. So now there's a question. Well, there is no Jewish king in charge at this point. By the time he wrote this, there wasn't. Right? And so maybe what he's saying is that's exactly what happens after the King Herod time, and maybe after the Bar Kokhba time, it's going to happen soon. What we actually have now is no autonomous Jewish government in the land of Israel. And because of that, then the Messiah can come. But we lived like that for 2,000 years. Of course, the problem is there are people who still interpret it this way, which is that the Messiah can't come unless there is nobody in charge in the land of Israel who's Jewish, which is why you get these crazy ultra-Orthodox Jews. Not many of them. There are some of them, and you see them running around with people in Iran and with Hamas supporters, and you wonder, like, how are these ultra-Orthodox people, like, how do they even logically say the things that they do? Because they quote this line, which is that Jews cannot be in charge of the land of Israel in any way, shape, or form if we want the Messiah to come. So there aren't many, but there are some who feel. The challenge, of course, for those people is you would say, for 2,000 years, the Jews had literally, since the Bar Kokhba revolt, there was no Jews in charge of the land of Israel. How can you say that the Messiah was going to come and there was none of that whole time? So that's why most people think that that's craziness. But there are people who say it. Why? Because there's a teaching about that. Again, they could have said it 2,000 years ago when they said it, because they hoped that now that they fulfilled that blank slate, if you will, that the Messiah would come. Because there is no pretender anymore. There is no King Herod. There are no more Maccabees. We can start over with the son of David. So he said it not because he didn't want Jews to be in charge, but he wanted this to happen, which is you're purged, you've been purged, and now you have a fresh start. And that's what Isaiah talks about. So that's the weirdness of the people who, again, say that maybe Jews shouldn't be in charge. The Messiah has to have a blank slate, if you will. I mean, I don't believe it. Most Israelis don't believe it. Most Jews don't believe it, but there are some. All right, so this paragraph's a little strange, and I really want to get to. Well, we'll just go through it a little. It says Jerusalem is redeemed only by means of righteousness, as it is stated, Zion shall be redeemed with justice, and those return to it with righteousness. Beautiful line from Isaiah. Rav Papa says, if the arrogant will cease to exist, the Persian sorcerers will cease to exist as well. If the deceitful judges will cease to exist, the royal officers and taskmasters will cease to exist. Rav Papa elaborates, if the arrogant will cease, the Persian sorcerers will cease, as it is written, I will purge away your dross, your sigayach, as with lie, and I will remove your alloy, which is bedelayach. When the arrogant sigim are purged, the sorcerers who are separated, muvdalim, which is the same root as bedelayach, from the fear of God will also cease. And if the deceitful judges cease to exist, the royal officers and taskmasters will cease to exist. As it is written, the Lord has removed your judgments and cast out your enemy. Also a line from Zephaniah. So what they're saying is that, look, we have people within our community who are a problem. They're the arrogant ones. And we also have sorcerers. We have people, specifically, they called them Persian sorcerers, the word that they used here for the Persians are magi, magic people. And again, those are people that are doing magic and sorcery and from the outside, and they're also not supposed to be doing that. So this text has got problems on the outside. We also have problems in the inside. So Rabbi Yochanan says, if you saw a generation whose wisdom and Torah studying is steadily diminishing, await the coming of the Messiah, as it is stated, and the afflicted people you will redeem. That's a line from Samuel. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you saw a generation whose troubles inundate it like a river, await the coming of the Messiah, as it is stated, when distress will come like a river that the breath of the Lord drives, from Isaiah, and juxtapose it with the next verse from Isaiah, and a Redeemer will come from Zion. So when you look at how close, those are next door verses. Distress will come like a river, and a Redeemer will come to Zion, are right next to each other. So when does the Messiah come? When it's the worst. Now, Rabbi Yochanan starts, and again, that's the Rabbi Yochanan who was friends and then enemies with Reish Lakish. That's that Rabbi Yochanan. And he lived during, the Roman era. He lived during tough times. But he said, look, if people are not following the Torah, it's the time when the Messiah is going to come, because things are going to be bad. And specifically, he said, same guy, Rabbi Yochanan says, they are living through horrible troubles. It's absolutely the horrible time. That's when the Messiah is going to come, which is why we have lots of teachings in today's world that the reason why we live in the Messianic era today, or at least the beginnings of the Messianic era, which are the Jews returning back to Israel, is because we went through the Holocaust. This type of mentality, this type of text here allows for that kind of understanding. It says that when your worst moments are happening, the worst moments in Jewish history are happening, that's, and what was the Holocaust of not being inundated with destruction like a river, that's when the Messiah comes. And that's why you have, for example, thousands of Chabad Hasidim, members of the Lubavitch movement, who felt that their Rebbe was the Messiah because he lived through the Holocaust. He did not live in Germany during the Holocaust, but he got out of Europe, and Chabad was one of the few Hasidic dynasties that survived the Holocaust. Remember, like 80% of Hasidic dynasties were wiped out in the Holocaust. Almost every one of the Hasidic dynasties that existed in the world were wiped out. The very few of them that made their way to America, luckily, or that their leaders made it their way to America, or as in the case of the Chabad folks, made it to Russia. If those people didn't survive the war, right, then I mean, which happened with most of them, there would be no more Hasidic Jews, and so they believed that their suffering was actually one of the, as they called it, one of the birth pangs of the Mashiach, of the Messiah. So the Holocaust actually proved that we were living after that in a messianic era. And what is a symbol of that? The return of the Jews to Israel. So all of that fell in the interpretation that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave, the last Rebbe of Chabad, who told people that we're living in these days. He did not, again, I don't want to say he claimed to be the Messiah, but many of his followers felt he was the Messiah. So there's a split amongst Chabad Hasidim over what that meant. There is no other Chabad rabbi, though, that has come forward and can come forward, if you will. He is the last Rebbe. So for Chabad, so can there be a Hasidic movement without a Rebbe? Yes. Yes. There are movements in other Hasidic dynasties that have existed. The Breslovers, which are a very large Hasidic movement that is primarily based in Israel, the Breslovers have existed for 200 years without a Rebbe. They have what's called the empty chair, which is the chair that was inhabited by their last Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, 200 years ago, and the guys never had a replacement. So they can continue like that, but the issue of him being the Messiah, which means that he's not really dead and then he'll come back, is held by some of his followers. So it's buttressed by this kind of text, which is when you live through hell, that's a sign the Messiah is coming. Okay? Now, Rabbi Yochanan had these last two texts. He also has this text too. Rabbi Yochanan says, the son of David will come only in a generation that is entirely innocent, in which case they will be deserving of redemption, or in a generation that is entirely guilty, in which case there will be no alternative to redemption. He may come in a generation that is entirely innocent, as it is written, and your people shall be righteous and they shall inherit the land forever. That's a line from Isaiah. So they will be righteous and they inherit the land forever. He may come in a generation that is entirely guilty, as it is written, and he saw that there was no man and was astonished that there was no intercessor. Therefore his arm brought salvation to him, and righteousness, it sustained him. Wait, that's also from Isaiah. So he used two proof texts from Isaiah to show maybe the Messiah comes when everyone's wicked, or maybe when everyone's innocent. For my own sake, oh, wait. So as is written, for my own sake will I do it. For how should it be profaned, and my glory will go, well, I will not give it to another. So maybe it takes I guess you can walk away with, well, Yochanan gave us a bunch of texts about what it's going to look like, what that end of days, and what the beginning of the new time looks like. So it's either really, really bad or it's really, really good. In which case, something needs to happen. Something needs to break in that kind of situation. It's going to go one way or the other. And then it'll be better. Okay. Yes. I guess we always think we live through the worst times or we live through the best times. Nobody ever says, well, it's kind of in between, or everyone says it's the worst times. sometimes they say it's the best time. I haven't heard that in a long time. We live in the best time, um, but that idea is that, of course, it will happen. So, um, Rabbi Alexandri says, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi raises a contradiction in a verse addressing God's commitment to redeem the Jewish people. It says in Isaiah, I, the Lord, in its time, I will hasten it. It is written in its time, indicating that there is a designated time for the redemption. And it is written, I will hasten it, indicating that there is no set time for the redemption. Rabbi Alexander explains, if they merit redemption through repentance and good deeds, I will hasten the coming of the Messiah. If they do not merit redemption, the coming of Messiah will be in its designated time. Again, Isaiah is a basis for messianic speculation because he talks about, especially in the, well, you saw some of the lines from Isaiah came from the beginning of Isaiah, but definitely the last part of Isaiah talks a lot about this kind of speculation. And of course, this was very important for Christianity. It's the basis for a lot of the Christian prophecies about the Messiah and specifically about Jesus. But for us, it's an interesting one because you can see that the rabbis are already reinterpreting or kind of putting a spin on what Isaiah said during the Roman era. I mean, this was written thousands of years ago, before, okay, some of it was written at the same time of Christianity, but some of it written before, obviously. And what they just said is like maybe there's a date, right? Maybe it's the year 2500. Maybe it is. That's the date it is. It's going to happen that date. But if you're really good and you merit redemption, it'll happen sooner. So, what's the takeaway from that is that, yeah, there's a set expiration date on this world. But that's not a good analogy because that's a bad thing. The expiration date's a bad thing. But this is like, well, look at it this way. Maybe this is a better way to say it. It doesn't really work for us, but okay, you have a birthday gift, or you have a Christmas present, or a Hanukkah present, and you know you're going to get that gift on your birthday or at the holiday. But if you're really good, I'm going to give you the present early. That's what this is. And of course, the present is the Messianic era, right? The present is that if you deserve it, you're going to get it earlier. If you aren't good and you just do your normal stuff and you don't think about it and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you'll get your present and you'll get it. But you're going to get it on the day it's due. But you can get it. And so what do they say? They derive that from I, the Lord, in its time, right? Its time means it is the time. There's a time, there's a date. But I will hasten it means I can speed it up. So if you're ready, we'll get moving on this quicker and graduate early. So that's the text there from Isaiah. Here's the line that also has a lot to do with the Christian belief. We'll read these couple of paragraphs, but we're definitely going to get to, because we're going to read for a little bit more, but I want you to see this. Another quote from Rabbi Alexandri, who quoting Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, raises a contradiction between the two depictions of the coming of the Messiah. It is written, there came with the clouds of heaven one like unto a son of man, and there was given him the dominion and the glory of kingdom, his dominion and its everlasting dominion. We're going to read that on Tuesday. It's a very famous line from Daniel, and it sounds a whole like Jesus. Well, it's not a coincidence. As I told you, you can't have Christianity unless you have Daniel. That's Daniel. Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about it, I promise, on Tuesday in more detail. But the reality is, as you can see, the quote from Daniel is a little Messiah seems like he's coming down pretty big, like with the, with the whole heavenly entourage, uh, you know, pretty glorified entry, like a king. And it is written, behold, your king will come to you. He is just and victorious, lowly, riding upon a donkey and upon a colt, the foal of a donkey. Rabbi Alexandria explains, if the Jewish people merit redemption, the Messiah will come in a miraculous manner with the clouds of heaven. If they do not merit redemption, the Messiah will come in lowly, riding upon a donkey. And so the rabbi said, look, or in this case, again, the quote says, look, we have these different depictions of the way the Messiah comes. The Messiah comes in with a great pageantry and amazing entry. Well, that's if you do it the right way, which is he comes early. If you do good, right? And we get the Messiah early, it's going to be a lot of beautiful pageantry. If you're not good and he comes when he's supposed to come and not a second earlier, he's going to come in like riding a donkey, which is not the most glorious entry, no matter what. Not that. It's not coming in with the clouds of heaven. And that's interesting, of course, because, again, when the Christian Bible talks about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on a donkey, it's interesting because he comes in on the donkey, according to the Christian Bible, he comes in on the donkey, and there's celebration because people think he's the Messiah. He comes in on the donkey, and there's not the clouds of heaven and that kind of thing, but there is this celebration that it's him because at least he's here. So it's not like, okay, we weren't good, right? That was kind of like the takeaway is like the Jews during the Roman era were not doing good stuff. I'm just going to show you something real quick. So 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 that's the so I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you two pictures. So again, these are the kind of pictures you'd see at church. So this is a picture of like what Jesus' entry was, which is he comes out on the donkey, people are waving the lulav, right? They're waving the palm branches. And that's, that's the entry that we read about in Zechariah. That's the coming in on the donkey, which is, it's not the angels and stuff like that. It's not this entry, right? It's not this entry. Well, that's not even a good one, but it's not this entry coming in on the clouds. It's not, it's this entry, and it's not this entry. Now, both of them are in the Bible, and the rabbis deal with it in the way of saying, well, you depending on what you do, whether you deserve it, that's the way he's going to come in. Christianity had a perfect answer to this. So they came up with another answer, which is Jesus came in like that, but you weren't ready for him. So when he comes back, he's going to come in like that. So nobody has Jesus coming back. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but the Christian readings of like when the second coming is going to happen, he's not coming back on the donkey. He's coming back out of heaven. So they have a way of kind of midrashically explaining those different versions of his entry. So if Jesus didn't come in, what you could say is if Jesus didn't come in on the clouds, like this, which you could understand why people at the time would have said, hey, Jesus didn't come in like that. But other people could have said, because they knew what the rabbis were already saying by that time, they were saying, like, no, we don't deserve it. So he's not going to come in like that. He's not coming in like that. We're horrible people right now. And they looked around. The rabbi said it. We're not good people right now. So he's not going to come in. We're fighting with each other, right? So he's not coming in like that. So when again, when he is executed, and then whether or not he is resurrected, when Jews didn't see him come back like that, but early Christians believed he would come back like that, and Christians today believe he'll come back like that. So he's not going to come back on a donkey. The question of what would happen today if Jews saw a guy riding a donkey through the streets of Jerusalem, they might think he's the Messiah because we're not great people, and maybe he's coming in like that. But that's the way we read those two lines, the one from Daniel and the one from Zechariah. You could say there's two different prophecies, right? There's one was written 300 years earlier than the other one. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, but the question that we would say, like we are, because we read it 2 weeks ago, we're not supposed to think about it, the date. We're not supposed to count it. We're not supposed to say, oh, he's supposed to be here in two. And I told you, some of the traditions are, well, he's coming in 250 years if you do the math, right? Or I said it's 5785, so it's 230 or 215 years from now. So it's not that far away. It's 5785 plus 215 would give us to the 6,000th year. So some people say we're close, but we're not quite close. Maybe we're close. I don't know. But if you go by what we read a couple weeks ago, we were on a 6,000-year cycle. So look at this text. King Shapur, who's the king of Persia, said to Shmuel, again, Shmuel was one of the rabbis in the Babylonian community in Iran, he said to him, you say that the Messiah will come on a donkey. I will send him riding on the horse that I have. And Shmuel said to him, do you have a horse with 1,000 colors? Bar Chivai Gavane, like the donkey of the Messiah? Certainly his donkey will be miraculous. So the king of Persia laughs at the Jews, saying, your Messiah is coming in on a donkey? I got a better horse than a donkey. And he says, no, this is no ordinary donkey. This has got bar chivar gavane. It's interpreted as he is having he has 1,000 colored. So now let's take a look at this, and this is where we're going to finish today. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi found Elijah the prophet, who was standing at the entrance of the burial cave of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, right? The mystical rabbi, Rabbi Elazar's father, the one who, again, according to tradition, is the writer of the Zohar. And so he's buried in Tiberias, in the area, like we said, around near Tiberias at Merom, where we go on Lag Bomer. So why would people hang out there? You might see Elijah, right? So he said, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said to Elijah, will I be privileged to come to the world to come? Elijah said to him, if this master, the Holy One, blessed be he, will wish it, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is so. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, two I saw, Elijah and me, and the voice of three I heard, as the divine presence was also there. It was a reference to him that Elijah said, if the master will wish it, say so. So what Elijah says to him essentially is, if you hear God, if you hear God's voice, then you will be privileged to see the world to come. And so he says, I think I'm seeing this. Now, of course, Yoshua ben Levi does not, he can go to heaven, but that's different than what we're talking about here, which is the Messianic era. So he thinks maybe he's going to live to see the Messianic era. And this is where we finish today, folks. How do we know when this will happen? When we enter in this world? Rabbi, it's a very powerful text here. To me, Rabbi Yoshua, I hope it is for you. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said to Elijah, remember this is, again, he sees Elijah. This is a big deal, right? You get to talk to Elijah. He knows the secrets. When will the Messiah come? Elijah said to him, go and ask him. Go and ask him. Go and ask the Messiah. Where is he? Where is he sitting? Elijah said to him, at the entrance of the city of Rome. He isn't here. He's not in Israel. He's in Rome. Exactly where you wouldn't expect to find him. He's not in our city. He's in the city that destroyed our city, our country, our Jerusalem was destroyed by those people in Rome. That's where the Messiah is. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi asked him, what is the identifying sign, right? How will I know him? How will I recognize him? Elijah said, he sits among the poor who suffer from illness, and all of them untie their bandages and tie them all at once. But the Messiah unties one bandage and ties one at a time. He says, perhaps I will be needed to serve to bring about the redemption. Therefore, I will never tie more than one bandage so that I will not be delayed. Let me explain that for a quick second before I get to you, because, of course, we haven't gotten to the kicker yet. Right? He's at the entrance of the gates. He's at the city wall of Rome, untying bandages. Now, is he untying his own bandages or the bandages of the people around him? It's not really clear. So either he's suffering with these people, or at the very best, he's taking care of them. He's with them as they are suffering. Now, he's the Messiah, so assumedly, he knows what's going on and he's doing this, but he doesn't untie all his bandages or their bandages. He unties each one by one, because he says, at any moment, I'm going to have to get on and get moving. It's going to be my time any moment. So the bandage untying, again, whether they're his bandages or other people's bandages, he doesn't do a whole thing of taking off all the bandages, because he only takes off the ones on his arm or the ones on somebody else's arm. He doesn't take off all their bandages because he might have to go at a moment's notice. Gotta go. Can't leave these bandages unattended. So it shows you that he's ready to go at any moment. I don't want to be delayed. Well, that's amazing, of course, because it means that the Messiah is ready to go. He's here. He's already here. And he's in the place you least expect. He's not doing the things you expect him to do. At the very least, he's not doing the things that you expect him to do. And you can understand, too, again, why people had this idea that, Jesus is with the most vulnerable people, because these were Jewish teachings, that a Messiah is not what you think. He's not a guy living like a king, at the very least. And he might himself be suffering. But no matter what, he's here and he's ready to go at any moment. Any moment. Now watch this. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi went to the Messiah. So he goes to Rome. He said to the Messiah, greetings to you, my rabbi and my teacher. The Messiah said to him, greetings to you, Bar Levi. That's his dad's name, right? Leviah, the Levi, right? Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said to him, when will the master come? And the Messiah said to him, today. Hayom, Hayom, today. That's what he said to him. He's coming today. Now you can imagine, by the way, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi must have gone crazy. He probably ran home. We got to get everything together. The Messiah is coming. He told me. I saw the Messiah and he told me he's coming today. Sometime later, doesn't say, I wouldn't say sometime later, Rabbi Yoshua, whatever, the next day, 2 days later, whenever he got back home, took a few days to get back home, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi came to Elijah. Elijah said to Yoshua ben Levi, what did the Messiah say to you? He said to Elijah, the Messiah said, greetings, shalom to you, Bar Levi. Elijah said to him, you thereby granted that you and your father will enter the world to come, as he said to you, shalom. That's good. That's good. That's good news. You're going to enter into the world to come. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said to Elijah, the Messiah lied to me. He said to me, I'm coming today, and he did not come. The Messiah lied to me. Elijah said to him, this is what he said to you. He said to you that he will come today if you will listen to his voice. And there's nothing else there. That's the end of the story. So that's one of the most powerful stories about what we believe about the Messiah, which is that, are we ready? Are we ready? So Elijah says to him today, but the interesting thing is that, like, how did he not hear that part? Like, what did he not hear? And there's, like, different ways of understanding this, which is that all Yoshua ben Levi said, all he heard was today. He didn't hear the other part, because as soon as the Messiah said today, that's it. Man, wow, it's today. He was so excited he didn't hear the whole part, or he just ran away as soon as he said today. Okay, bye, and he's still talking. Messiah is not done. He didn't hear the rest of it, but you didn't listen. Or maybe Yoshua ben Levi, you ran away and you didn't look at the fact that the Messiah and the other people sitting around him were all bandaged up. You didn't do anything. And so there's a possibility that, Yoshua ben Levi is so excited and is so focused on the Messianic era that he doesn't realize that it's not going to be here unless those people that are sitting and suffering outside the gate of Rome, until they're taken care of, there is no Messiah coming. It's something broken out there. And of course, what is the gate of Rome? What is that outside the gates of Rome? It's the center of power of the world. And this beautiful city, this beautiful empire, this beautiful kingdom that did so much, can't take care of their own people. Now, you can make the argument, well, Israel's suffering too at that time, and they were. And they're suffering because they were at war with Rome, and they were victims of the loss of sovereignty, and they kept fighting the Romans in battles that they couldn't possibly win. And so they continue to be subjugated and turned upside down by the Romans. But even more importantly, you could make the case that Rome, with all this great wealth that they've now plundered from Israel, that they've plundered from the whole world, that they can't take care of their own people. And he doesn't see it. Yoshua ben Levi doesn't see it. He doesn't see the fact that Rome, the center of the universe, if you will, is broken. and you didn't listen. You didn't hear the whole message. So it's a beautiful teaching. It's one that, I don't remember the first time I learned it as a kid, but it stuck with me because these are the Jewish teachings about the Messiah. These are the Jewish teachings about how we make the world ready for the redemption, which is, are we listening? And what are we listening to, right? If we are listening, what are we listening to? What kind of noise are we listening to? So it's very easy to get lost in that noise. It's very easy not to hear the Messiah, but he's there, according to this teaching. He's there in, you can argue, our own backyard. I mean, based on this, the Messiah is sitting outside the gate of Washington, D.C. or New York, saying, are you going to listen today? Because I'm here. I'm ready to go. Are you? So it's a pretty important teaching, and it's one that reminds us that we have a tremendous obligation as Jews. Again, there are continued discussions about this, and continues to go on about what are the different signs. But for 2,000 years, we've been waiting. And are we closer or are we further away from that? Again, are the signs around us right now? I don't know. Maybe. But again, what bigger sign do you need than the Messiah himself telling you that he's already here? Yeah. So Elijah's there, and also Elijah's there, and so is so is the Messiah. And of course, that's the idea that Elijah is there to remind us, or is there to tell us. And that's why we welcome Elijah every Passover. We bring him into our Seder, not because he needs to drink wine, but because we're hoping that he's going to tell us this Passover is the time of the Messiah. This is the Messianic era. This is the time when we're going to finally fix it. So, looks like we're going to be waiting for another Passover. I hope. I hope. Thank you, everybody. Hayom today.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I thought Elijah was the Messiah.
That's interesting, right?
That's interesting, right?
He's the announcer of the Messianic era. And this was a really important idea. Understanding that Elijah is the guy who announces the Messianic era is something that was, why one of the reasons. Again, he does other things, right? He does miracles, and he's there to kind of give us hope but it's because he, to some extent, that he's going to have that role to play in being the announcer. It's one of the interesting things that kind of exists in we have it from the prophet Malachi, right? It's in the Bible itself. So I'll just show you real quick the importance of where it comes from, and where it comes from Passover in particular. And we read this line. It's the end of the prophets for us. It's the very end of. It's a very short book, Malachi, but it says right here, right? What's it going to happen? Lo, I will send Messiah. I just said Messiah. I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome and fearful day of God. Right? He shall reconcile parents with their children and children with their parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. So this is the. That's the. That is. This announcing. This is the first time that we have Elijah doing this kind of stuff. But it is an interesting text because it's one of the things that Christians kind of believe that John the Baptist was announcing the coming of Jesus. So, you know, that was what that was kind of you know I'll just show you one of the places in the Christian Bible where you specifically see this towards the beginning of the Christian Bible. You have John the Baptist specifically being asked, "Are you Elijah?" And he said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He said, "No." So those are, these are some different translations of it, but you can see that, people were looking for Elijah to announce it. It's critical for what? It's very good. But yeah, so this is important in early Christianity as well. So yeah, Elijah's role is pretty important, pretty critical. Okay, so we're finished tonight. As I said, we'll be back next week. Why am I getting text from my family that Max Muncie's hurt?